This is very much an experiment today. I am shooting a video as I record this because apparently everything has to be video now. And to participate in the algorithm-driven world of 2025, I need to promote this show as a video. And anyway, welcome back to Wanderous. My name is Andrew Crusoe, and today I'm going to share with you a pretty fun little adventure all the way from Istanbul through Abu Dhabi to Kathmandu, Nepal. I've been talking about Nepal for a while, and I'm going to talk about the pretty rough introduction that I had to Nepal today, an unexpectedly delicious finale. Come along with me. Believe it or not, recording this episode is proving to be more challenging than I thought it would be, because for the first time I'm taking a video as I record, and it's just off to the side here. Can I take the brightness down? Can I, as it records? I can turn the brightness down. Okay, fun fact that I just found out, and you can too. You can, if you have an iPhone, you can swipe on the top right. If it's a new one, you can swipe on the top right, and you can turn the brightness down of your screen as you record. I didn't know that. I didn't want to screw up the video, but I just did it absentmindedly, and it's okay. So I'm going to turn the brightness down all the way because it's distracting to see your face in the corner of your eye just doing whatever you're doing in that moment. A little bit distracting. So yeah, this episode is an experiment. You know, I did 50 episodes of this show without any video, but I really want to grow the show, and I think the best way, the path of most allowing, the path of least resistance, is to release little clips of this show on all the social media, and it's so driven by video now. Audio is not enough. Unfortunately, I don't think audio is enough. I wish it was, but I don't think it's enough. People want to see my handsome face, apparently. So we're going to do this. It's an experiment. Let me know what you think. I'm open to constructive feedback, constructive criticism, always. And let's jump in. This is a big episode. This is a big episode because after 10 days in Turkey, I was about to leave. After 10 beautiful days in Istanbul, I was about to move on, and I have been hinting at this for months on this show. I was about to move on to Nepal. But before I did that, I had one final day. I think this was the afternoon of the 9th day, where I just took some photos. I just took some photos of this beautiful architecture around the Golden Horn. People who support this show will get all these videos and photos. There's video up there too. This week's bonus on Wednesday, they're going to get over a dozen like really high quality photos that I shot of Turkey and of the transition of getting to Nepal, which is, today, this is the big story that I'm going to share with you today. But before I departed Istanbul, I was just, again, taken aback by how beautiful the city is, especially in the twilight, in the late afternoon, when the sun hits the sides of these pale walls on the Cape. On the Cape? What am I saying? On the Strait. I'm going to leave that in because I'm not perfect. The funny thing was, the last night I was being hosted by, again, this lovely family in this like 4th floor of this sort of apartment complex, but it was pretty nice. And they decided to have a gathering. And initially I was like, oh no, I don't want to be social right now. I want to just conserve all my energy. But it ended up being pretty fun. They had like, it wasn't that big. It was like, they had like 4 friends over. And they had this like laser light show device thing that would shoot. It was almost like a disco ball. So the supporters I don't usually share a photo of where I get hosted, but this is pretty psychedelic and pretty dark. And there's no people in the picture of just how cool they're living. Because this couple was cool. They were tech nerds. They had, the husband had an Apple Watch Ultra, and they worked remotely. They really had a good gig going. They had one kid. They worked remotely. and they had an extra room, and they graciously decided to host me for 5 nights, and I left them a very good reference, and they left me a good reference. It was just really sweet. I've talked about that in previous episodes. But adjacent, like right across from this living room, was this balcony, and that's where I took these really pretty like photos of their view across the Golden Horn. The Golden Horn is the kind of a part of the strait, like a tributary, you could say, that you can take up to the west from the divider. I just call it the divider. It's the Bosphorus Strait. It divides Europe and Asia. And of course, Istanbul is on both sides of this, and you can take, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, you can take a ferry across for very, very, very cheap. And the next photo I have of this is my big Osprey pack in the overhead. But I got to share a short story that I didn't take any photos of this because I was just completely stressed out. Now, a lot of people wouldn't admit this, but I very nearly screwed up my entire day, maybe even my entire week. And I'm just going to share this story briefly as an intro into my journey over to Nepal. You see, I miscalculated my time. I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm on the ferry and I realize, oh no, I'm going to have like 30 minutes to get through security. I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was sleep deprived, but I figured it out, and I essentially somehow, like a bonehead, like dropped an hour. It's like after the pandemic, like people start dropping a year. Like a lot of people just drop 2021 because whatever happened in 2021 anyway. I don't know. I mean, some things happened to me, but they weren't great, actually. So I dropped an hour, and and I was like, I panicked. I don't know, because I knew the bus from Kadikoy, which is the bus I initially took to get from the airport, the SAW airport, the Sabia Gökçen airport. There's 2 airports. There's one on the west side, and there's one on the east side of the Bosphorus Strait. The east side one, all my flights were coming in and out of that. But it was a bit further from the city. So I call my host. I'm like, oh man, can I just pay you to drive me to the airport? I've never asked that of a host before. And he said, to paraphrase, he said, oh man, dude, I can't. Like I've got stuff going on today. I'm totally swamped with work. And I was like, yeah, I thought that might be the case. And he says, well, you could try this, you could try that, you could try. I think it was he who suggested that I tried a subway, which was a recently completed line from Kadikoy to the airport. He said, I don't know how often it runs, but you might be able to save some time doing that. So I think I was just getting on the ferry, just about to leave 4G signal. And I'm sort of panicking on Google Maps going, okay, what's the best way to do this? Because the ferry's going to take, and the ferry, not that much slower than the under the strait train anyway. But I'm panicking, and I'm just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I look and I find that there's even a way to get priority security clearance. You can actually, you pay them a bit. So I'm like, okay, I can maybe do that when I get to the airport, but still I'm cutting it. Like I can't get to the airport a half an hour before my flight. That's crazy. I've only ever missed 1 flight in my life. I'm not going to let it be 2. Not today. I'm just like freaking out. And I get to the other side of the strait and I'm just running with all my stuff, probably 18 kilograms of stuff because I haven't, I still have stuff that I don't really use very often, including a very pretty, I might say, sapphire blue silk sleeping sheet, which I only used once. I don't travel with it anymore. Yeah, silk is not heavy, but every little bit counts, you guys. So, and I just had stuff. I had stuff that I didn't really, I had a pair of shorts I never wore, and it was too much stuff, and I'm running across Kadikoy to the subway station, and I get through and I use my Istanbul card one more time, and it's going to be, okay, they're saying it's going to be like 40 minutes. Maybe I'll have more than a half an hour. If everything goes well, I'll get to the airport like an hour before, which is still crazy. I think maybe it was an hour 15 before my international flight. I'm like, this is really bad. Somehow I'm able to get on the train quite quickly within like 5 minutes, and I'm just sweating it. Get on the train. Of course, if you travel a lot, you probably had this experience where when you're on the train, you throw up your hands and you just leave it up to God or source or whatever divinity you ascribe to. You're like, okay, God, it's all you now. I've done my part. Please let this train move efficiently through the network. Now, the good thing about this train was, I think all of that line was underground. If I had been trying to get to the airport via a taxi, I would have been screwed, because this was, I think it was coming up on we're coming up on early rush hour. And I was just like, okay, this is good. I'm underground. Okay. I don't recall exactly when I got to the airport. I think I got to the airport maybe an hour before my flight. Still, absolutely terrible idea. Don't do it. I pay like $10 for priority security. The airport's way more confusing than I remember. There's multiple levels. It's like a maze. I'm asking people for help. They're like, oh, just go up to the escalator and go to the thing. And I pay, and I get into the priority security, and nobody else is in line. I go, oh, okay, this is good, right? This is good. And I get to my gate like a half an hour before the flight. I couldn't believe it. I went through, I think it was maybe less than 30 minutes from stepping off the train to arriving to getting through security. And like I said, priority helped, but I don't know how much it helped, because I realized it was a slow day at the airport for whatever reason. Getting through security, looking at the airplane in under 30 minutes. I could not believe it. Okay, let's be honest, guys. I got pretty lucky, or I manifested it or whatever, but I felt very lucky and breathed a huge sigh of relief. Otherwise, because I had a transferring flight. I couldn't miss that flight. There was no like non-super expensive. There were not very many. There were no flights as I was aware of, going from Istanbul directly to Kathmandu. They all were transferring in Abu Dhabi, which is fun. So I get on my flight, sigh of relief. My bag's checked. I mean, everything just starts to flow really well. I got a window seat. Always love to get a window seat. And we were about to fly over. If you look at the globe, you will see when you fly to Abu Dhabi, you fly over Iraq for most of it. It's a different feeling, man. And I was really excited to see some of the desert, but unfortunately, by the time we got over the Middle East, it was completely dark. I do remember looking out. I mean, it was really dark. We flew over areas where there weren't a lot of people at all. We flew over maybe like one or two cities, but most of it was super dark. I remember peering out the window and just seeing a lone point of light in the middle of this vast blackness of the desert, and thinking, I wonder what it's like to live there. I don't think I'd want to live there. That's what I thought to myself. And we land in Abu Dhabi at around 8 p.m. Yeah, it was about a 4-hour flight. And it was a 4-hour layover. So I had plenty of time in the Abu Dhabi airport to buy a very overpriced sandwich and a very overpriced banana. I think it's even in the video. There's a video for people who enjoy show notes. You can always check out the show notes to the show wherever you're listening to it. So on YouTube, it's in the YouTube description. On Spotify, it's in the Spotify description. And I like to, because I've edited quite a few of the videos that I shot during this and made them into little shorts. So you can go, there's a couple funny shorts, one or two of my time in the Abu Dhabi airport, finding a vegan sandwich, which was totally a miracle. And I sat down at a table and I met this guy, and he had a nonprofit raising money for the kids in Nepal and doing, I don't remember all the details. This was a while ago, more than a couple years ago. But I met him, had a great conversation with him, And I met a girl from Russia who was very excitedly, I believe she was also going to Nepal, although I didn't see either of them ever again, which is kind of a shame. But we just hung out at one of the tables, and we just hung out and talked about travel and how powerful travel can be. So it's kind of it's fun to have these little gatherings of like-minded people, little similar vibes. Sometimes that can happen, and it's a really lovely experience. The Abu Dhabi airport is a little bit confusing as well, like a lot of large airports. And, I had my sandwich. I was still hungry. I bought a banana for the equivalent of $1, which is the most I've ever. People who follow my work know that I talk about the price of bananas a lot. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I think they're a great source of potassium. And I think they're also an interesting barometer of the differences in the supply chain and the strength of a currency, and many factors come together to figure out the price of a banana in a country. And I think it's really fascinating. So, I don't know. Most I've ever spent on a banana. Maybe don't buy fruit in Abu Dhabi if you can avoid it. But I couldn't find that much food that didn't have milk in the airport, unfortunately, and didn't have meat or milk. And me being plant-based and being lactose intolerant, it's kind of tough. I should warn you. Maybe a little travel tip I'll throw in here. Come prepared. Try to bring a granola bar if you can. I was able to survive, but the options were definitely limited. Kind of a bummer. So we get on the next plane. I remember walking across, even when we landed, I remember it was real hot. It was like 30 degrees at night, super humid, 30 degrees Celsius, which is 86 Fahrenheit. It was hot. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, note to self, never go to Abu Dhabi during the day. It's hot. It's the desert. It's intense. And it's not the dry desert. It's the hot desert, because they've got the Gulf right there, and they've got they're surrounded by water on three sides. That part of the world is just, it's intense. And it's 4 hours to get to Nepal. Not as long as you would think. And we, again, didn't see much. It was nighttime. I think I managed to get 3.5 hours of sleep. My phone alarm goes off, and I look out, and I see mountains, right? Of course, tons of mountains. And, we're going to land at like 6:30 local time. I'm running on 3 hours of sleep. I already know this is going to be a long day. Of course, it's going to be a long day. The cool part was I was sitting next to a Nepali guy, and I was looking out the window. He had the window seat, actually. And I said, wow, that's beautiful. Look at those mountains. And he goes, no. Those aren't mountains. Those are hills. Because, of course, for someone from Nepal, what they consider a mountain is probably going to be a bit taller than what I consider a mountain. They have the tallest mountains on the planet. And what they consider a hill is going to be probably big to me, maybe. It was interesting just to think about the relative experience. These Nepalis are just surrounded by the Himalayas and the horizon, like most of the time. And that was something that I was going to discover in my time in Nepal. So we land, and it's kind of chilly. It's October in Kathmandu. We land, and it's a pretty steep descent. It's one of the more challenging for a pilot. I was reading about this. For a pilot, it's one of the more challenging airports to land in, because Kathmandu is very much in a valley surrounded by mountains. I tried to fill out the visa form ahead of time, but it expired. The website was not very clear. You can't fill it out more than 3 days before. They expire after 3 days. And I timed it poorly. So I had to go to the touchscreen, fill out the whole thing. There was this line. They had like 2 touchscreens were working, and only 2 of them, 2 out of the 4 were working. So I had to wait. And people cut in front of me in line, and I was like, oh, this is kind of a rough start. Sometimes when you get to a country, you get a rough start. But I was like, I didn't make a stink about it. I was like, I'm not going to argue with this, I don't know, Eastern European person. They're probably having a tougher time than me. So I fill out the form, and it says, okay, we got this code. because you have to put in your passport number and everything. And then you go to the desk, and I was totally prepared to pay them in cash, but they actually accepted American credit card, which was really nice. So I paid at the time. I knew I wanted to really soak in Nepal, so I paid for a 3-month visa, which was $125 US, which is a little more than a lot of other countries around there. But Nepal is very much a tourist-driven economy and a relatively poor country, so it makes sense why they would charge a little more than, say, India. They don't really have a big manufacturing sector. They're very much tourist-based. So I finally make it through. I get my bag. Okay, great. I'm moving along. I'm getting hungry, but I did research beforehand. Here's what I would recommend. I'm going to try to frame this in a series of travel tips. It's okay to get a SIM card in the airport. They give you a pretty good deal. Some places I would recommend not to get a SIM card in the airport, like Japan. Don't do that. It's not great unless you're only there for a couple of days. You're not going to get a great deal. But in Nepal, it's totally fine. And they even accept, as my supporters will see in Wednesday's photo bonus, they even accept cash, American cash. It is the global reserve currency for now. And it flowed pretty well. I went with Ncell, the letter Ncell. Their coverage was good because I actually tried to go and pull some Nepali rupees, and the ATM, the first ATM wouldn't work. And this was going to be a theme for my challenging first day in Nepal. So I go back, I'm like, yeah, okay, I have cash. I had some backup cash and signed up, went pretty smooth. They helped me activate it, and voila, I had data in Nepal, which is real big relief, very, very helpful, especially to get around in a new city. To be able to have digital maps to map yourself where you're going is essential. And not to mention the ability to use rideshare, which I would be using soon. That's also going to be a big theme in Asia. How many countries have, pretty much all of them have Uber or something really similar, often cheaper than Uber, although India has Uber and is fairly priced, but they all have their own things, and we're going to get to that. Of apps like Patao and InDrive, those are definitely the good ones. INDRIVE, I would recommend downloading InDrive if you go to, I think it even works in Thailand. That's a really good app where you can actually pay the driver in cash, and you can get on a motorbike for very cheap, or you can get a car. Definitely cheaper than Uber in the West, of course, because of the strength of the currency. But I get my SIM card activated. Everything's going smooth. I walk out of the airport. Of course, the taxi driver's like, hey, where do you want to go? I'm like, well, actually, the ATM didn't work here. So Google Maps says there's an ATM over here, not very far. And I walk out of the airport. So it really, beautiful day. Definitely blessed for the weather. And of course, I did tons of research. People who have been listening to this show for a while, I did tons of research on when was the best time to go. There was a reason I picked Nepal, not just because it was on my list, but because Nepal has some of the best weather in the world for October. It might be the best place in the world to be in October. That's a big statement. Parts of California are also amazing in October. A lot of places are pretty good in October. Even Tokyo is pretty good in October. But in terms of Asia, the continent of Asia, Nepal is ideal. So I knew the weather would be good. You're looking at, it was like 26 degrees Celsius. It was like mid-70s Fahrenheit. And I don't know, like 55% humidity, like very comfortable, very nice, sunny, not rainy. Yeah, it was the dry season. You got to go during the dry season. It's fantastic. So there's another travel tip for you. For those of you just waiting for the tricks and tips, although I feel like most of you are probably listening to live vicariously through my crazy life. Crazy in a good way, right? Adventurous. I shouldn't say crazy. I should say adventurous, shouldn't I? So I walk to this ATM, and it's next to this tiny coffee stall, and it rejects my card too. Now, it's worth mentioning, and I'm I've ameliorated this now in my process, but I only had 2 plastic cards on me. One was a Visa credit card and one was a debit card. I really didn't like to use the debit card because debit cards naturally have a little less protection. There's some fraud protection, but if you get scammed and you don't report it, it depends on it depends on your bank, but typically debit cards have less security. And I'm in a foreign country and my card's not working. I walked to another ATM, also rejects it. I'm like, what is going on? I didn't want to use my debit card because I was hearing at the time, these stories of people skimming. Now you should be aware, if you don't know what skimming is, it's when people modify an ATM or another point of sale, these little boxes that waiters hold at restaurants where you can scan your card. And what they'll do is they'll put and this apparently happened to me last year in Bali, they'll put a device, add it on. I actually don't know why it happened. Something weird happened to my card in Bali last year, which was a whole deal. They'll put a device on the ATM itself that will skim your card's number and info as you use it, and you won't know anything's happening. And then several days later, they will use that information to make a charge on your card. And they have your info now, depending on the specific card, they can just, use it. So the only thing you can do is cancel that card, and that sucks. And that's really tough, especially when you're on the other side of the planet. What I had to do at one point was I had to have family send me a new card. It happened a couple, traveling for years, you're going to have situations where you unfortunately leave a card somewhere. It doesn't end up in lost and found. Now, if you're in places like Japan, you can get away with sending it non-registered, kind of risky. Maybe I'll do a whole episode about that, sending cards to yourself. You can get away with sending a card through a normal envelope. It's not activated, so the risk is relatively low, and you can send a card to yourself for $2. But if you want to have tracking, which is much better if you have, you're going to spend probably $30 to send it via FedEx or DHL or registered USPS mail. I can do a whole episode about that if people want to know options to do that and what's worked for me. I have some stories about that. You can leave a comment if you want to hear about that. That's one of the most stressful things about international travel, unfortunately, can be when that happens. And it does happen sometimes. Getting a replacement card can be a real pain in the neck. And I hope in my lifetime, we can move beyond these pieces of plastic and have a chain of custody, have a line of trust that doesn't require, this funny physical object, because I think we're going to outgrow that. I hope. But I'm still wandering around Kathmandu at this point. I'm still wandering around Nepal, and I can't get any cash. And this is the problem because the rideshare apps that I have only accept cash. They don't want, now some rideshare apps will accept a foreign card. Here on Bali, it's extremely convenient, works very well. They've worked really hard on that. But in Nepal, it doesn't work as well. It's even trickier in India because a lot of Indian companies won't work with a foreign credit card at all. You have to go to an ATM. And I'll be talking about that in later episodes. That's fun. So almost in defiant protest to my current reality, I start just walking with all my stuff. Now, the airport is on the east side of Kathmandu, and I just start walking towards city center with all my crap. And I'm using walking directions, which, depending on the city, Google Maps walking directions can be fine. Sometimes they're very useful. Sometimes they're just fine. And I realized very quickly that it does matter that it's Sunday. A lot of things are closed. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sleep deprived. I'm hungry. I can't get cash. This is bad. This is bad. I get kind of weird when I have low blood sugar. I make poor decisions. And I basically walked halfway across Kathmandu looking for a damn ATM that would work. I finally make it to this coffee shop where my body is like, Andrew, if you don't eat some food, we're going to shut down and we might be homeless. This is what my body is telling me. It doesn't know, my body doesn't know per se that I have a great couch surfing host lined up for that night. My body is just freaking out a little bit because I haven't eaten in 12 or 14 hours. I've slept for 3 hours. So I wander into this coffee shop. Now, keep in mind, I landed at 6:30 in the morning. It took me an hour to get through visa, get my stuff, another half an hour. It's coming up on 8, maybe 8 in the morning, something like that. Things are opening up. I get a croissant and some fruit and some coffee. How do I pay for this? I don't know. I just have faith that they're going to let me pay. I asked them, can I pay with a card when I walk in? And they said, yes. I go, thank God. I'm like, I don't think my card is frozen. I think these ATMs are just being weird. So I went on my gut. I'm like, I think this is going to work out. I believe I even walked by, I think I went into another place. Yeah, I went into another place. I sat down and I asked them, do you take card? And they said, no. It was like 1 or 2 other places. And I'm just walking. And again, it's a very pretty morning, but I'm just exhausted. I make it in this place. I sit down, and a huge amount of relief just to have bread and cantaloupe, which is not my favorite, but cantaloupe and watermelon. It was such a relief to have this. And I have my meal. I pay with my card. There's another guy there. And I have this, sometimes in life, you have this like total irrational gut idea of like, I'm just going to ask this guy, can I buy Nepali rupees off of you? Because I have American money, right? And at the time, and it's still true, it's pretty close, 1 American dollar was 130 Nepali rupees. And I Google it, I'm like, and I'm like, hey, can I just buy some rupees off me? He's like, and he can tell, I think he could tell I was having a very difficult day. And there are money changers there. And he's like, sure. And I think I gave him $10. And he gave me 1,300 Nepal video game points. And which is what I call foreign currency or where I am. Although, I mean, US dollars are just American video game points. So I got some Nepal points, Nepal currency. And I just felt, okay, even if I can't get money for the next while, at least I have the ability to buy food if I have to, if I can't, because it can feel so debilitating if you can't buy, obviously, if you can't buy anything. So I'm going to use a word that I've used too much in the past, but I feel buoyed at this point. I'm like, okay. And I check Google Maps. I'm like, there's another ATM over here. And I start walking there. And it's not, it's not far. It's like a 5-minute walk. I took a picture of this because I was so disappointed. Invalid. Your last transaction has been canceled. Please contact bank. Now, there are certain ATMs that just don't want to work with foreign cards. That is true. But I know that there is a huge tourist population that goes to Nepal. Something has to work. I'm not coming in with an American Express card. I have I have a Visa. Like Visa and MasterCard are the standard, right? Right? I didn't know. I was really, really forlorn would be the word. I don't know what I was thinking. I just start walking again. I'm just like, I should have grabbed I'll tell you why I started walking. I fell into a scarcity mindset. I will completely That's right. That's what it was. I will admit that. And it was bad. It's a bad look. It's a bad look for Andrew when he falls into a scarcity mindset. But I was like, what if I can't get any cash in this country? I was starting to spiral a little bit. I was like, what if I can't get any cash? What am I going to do? How can I function in a country that it's like New York? I mean, so much of it is cash based. So I was like, maybe I shouldn't use rideshare at all. Maybe I should just walk to and then have my host. Maybe they can pick me up. The problem was they were basically in a town outside of Kathmandu. I couldn't find anybody actually in Kathmandu. I had a host who had to back out last minute. So I had this other host who was a very nice couple, but they were, like a 15-minute, 10-minute at least drive away. It was a distance. So I was like, well, maybe they work in town. I'm trying to figure out what to do. Because often when you're traveling, you have to think on your feet, especially when you're adapting to a totally new system. I've crossed the ring road somewhere around this time. Now, the ring road, which is something we'll talk about, the ring road is this road that's a highway, that's a ring that goes around Kathmandu proper. And the buses go clockwise and anti-clockwise. And there is no schedule. There used to be. Apparently there's not anymore. And you just kind of flag a bus down. I'm sure I'll talk about this in further episodes. But the funny part about that was there also wasn't any traffic signal. Now, I should have anticipated this, right? Kathmandu is a developing city, and it was the biggest culture shock I had had up to that point. It was kind of dusty. It was chaotic. And I would watch locals cross the road like it was a magic trick. Somehow they were reading the traffic in a way that I could not. And what I ended up doing was, it sounds terrible. I basically would walk behind them. That was the only way I could feel safe. Now, a cynical person might say that I was using them as a human shield. I wasn't asking them to do anything. I was just walking beside them when they would cross the street and mimicking their timing. And that was the only way that I could cross the street, because there were no designated crossing lanes. There was nothing like that. There were scarcely any signals of any kind, any lights of any kind. There were a few. There's a few on the ring road, but not the many. So I eventually make it to the city center. I've walked, I don't even know, several miles, like several kilometers with all my stuff on my back somehow. Again, on 3 hours of sleep. Very tired. And I'm hungry again. I mean, eating a croissant and some fruit and 1 cup of coffee does not a whole breakfast make. And I find what I learned is they call them sweets shops in that part of the world. They're essentially like little cafes. And I have my first, I have my first dosa. This huge folded like crepe with potato. And I go to pay, and their machine, their Ingenico point of sale card thingy, I put the chip in, the card, it's a card with the chip, says issuer inoperative. I'm like, what the heck? But I had my cash. I had the cash that I exchanged with a random person at the coffee shop. So I pay for my lunch, which was cheap. It was like the equivalent of $1. It was like 130, maybe it was 100 rupees. And somehow I go upstairs and I have my food. I go upstairs. I ask where the restroom is. I'm in like this like tall like office building almost, but the cafe is at the first floor. And I go upstairs to the tiny little toilet. Very interesting construction, very interesting like architecture. And I run into, that's right. I was looking for water. I don't remember. I was so exhausted. And I wasn't even making memories efficiently at this point. Of course, right? 3 hours of sleep. I don't work very well in 3 hours of sleep. And I'll never forget this, though. I strike up a conversation with this guy because there's a whole office area across from the restroom. And I probably look like crap. And this random person, he's like, hey, do you want some tea? Are you okay? Do you have water? This random person made me tea. We sat, we talked for a little while. He was on, I think must have been on his lunch break. I imagine there aren't that many foreigners that have all their stuff on their back that clearly look like a Westerner who's completely out of their element, look, who clearly need a little bit of help. So the guy made me tea. It was really cool. I think we even exchanged WhatsApp info. And I took a photo. People who support the show on Patreon, you can always go to patreon.com to get all the photos. Every episode of the show, I have at least a dozen, sometimes 3 dozen, rich. A lot of them are shot in RAW, really beautiful shots. A little while ago, I was like, this month, one of my long-term supporters who's been supporting my work for over 7 years. Thank you so much. You know who you are. Really means a lot. She was like, this is my favorite. There was a shot of Istanbul, a photo set of Istanbul. And she said, this is my favorite set you've ever done. It was the one with the cistern, the Basilica cistern. She said, these are gorgeous. So people enjoy the photos. And this week you're going to see my view from, I think it's the 3rd floor of this office complex. It doesn't sound great, but you get the vibe. You get the vibe of, and all these like big 5-gallon water jugs, these 19-liter, which is the standard in Asia. I have one in this very place that I live, my special drinking water, because you cannot drink from the faucet. Do not drink the tap water in Asia. Please, you will get sick. Unless you're in Japan. That's the only place. And technically, there's one state in India that they say it's okay, but I wouldn't risk it. It was a difficult afternoon. For some reason, I kept walking. I don't know what I was like delirious at this point. I just kept walking, and I made it to the main road that would head south. I've been texting with my couch surfing host the whole time, explained my trouble with the ATMs, and they said, don't worry about it. We'll call you a ride share and you can, because I'm being a little bit, I fell into scarcity. I'm like, well, I should just take a bus. I'm asking around and nobody can tell me where the bus stop is. It's very confusing. And I think I find a bus stop. I get to a stop and people say, no, this stop isn't going to where you think it's going to. Because of course, Kathmandu, at least at the time, their bus schedules were really not included in Google Maps. Google Maps was not helpful. Most foreigners aren't going to use that anyway. They're going to use the rideshare services. But I knew that the bus was going to be like 50 cents and I would have plenty of cash left over if I really needed it the next day. If I knew what I knew now, I would say, and I will find for further episodes, I will tell you my recommended ATM. I think part of the problem was that my bank incorrectly filed. I'm trying to recall exactly. They incorrectly filed my travel notification. That was part of the problem. But there is an ATM that tends to be a bit better. And I think it's the N. It starts with an N. It's a 3-letter acronym. Everything is acronyms in Asia. But I'll get that for further episodes. I believe I have a photo of that ATM too. I have a recommended ATM. I have a recommended ATM for many countries. In India, use the State Bank of India. Use SBI ATM. They don't charge an extra fee. One problem with Nepal, one frustration I felt in Nepal was every ATM I could find also charged extra just to use the ATM, just to pull money from outside the country. They were going to charge you $2 or $3 every time. So it behooves you to pull out a lot of money at once, so you're not just getting hammered every single time you need a little bit of cash. So there's something else to keep in mind, another little travel tip to keep in mind. But the funny part was the way that this ended, the way this day ended was that they text me back, a couple that's going to host me said, nobody is responding on the rideshare apps. This is really strange. This must be like a high demand time. And it was right around dusk at this point. I've spent all day just sort of slowly making my way west across the, kind of chaotic, kind of dusty, but very interesting capital city of Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. And I go, I don't know what to do. And they said, you know what? My husband's going to be there. He's going to come and pick you up. And by God, my listeners, this man came up, and I think it might have even been like a 20-minute drive for them, and picked me up on his bike. This couple I felt like they saved my life in a couple ways. I'll talk about them more in the next episode. Picked me up on his bike. It was so kind of them. I still have all my crap. I sit on his bike. I loosen, because this is a new thing for me. I didn't ride on a motorcycle on Turkey or Europe. I've been on a motorcycle before. This is what we call them in America. Or moped or mobike, whatever. I hadn't ridden a motorcycle in a long time. And I realized, if I loosen my back straps on my Osprey pack, all of the weight can just fall onto the seat instead of being held on my back. So I did that. That is much better. It's dark. And we zip down. We follow circuitous paths. And we end up in this quieter neighborhood surrounded by hills. He leads me in up the stairs. They're on the second floor. I meet his wife, who's very sweet. They're both so sweet. They don't have a kid. I found out they've been married for like 6 months. They show me the guest room. They show me they have a little shower, which I realize now is pretty special. Not everybody has a shower in Asia. A lot of people use bucket showers. There no hot water, but it was a shower. It wasn't that cold. And I felt so relieved. I made it. So I made it. Very long, exhausting day. I looked down at my forearm and I still don't know what this was. I have 6 or 7 red dots. I've included this photo for supporters too. Maybe you can have a thought of what this was. I don't know if it was bug bites or mild hives from the stress, but I have some dots along my forearm. And I think, oh, this is great. Maybe I'll have to go to the doctor after all this too. This is great. But I take did I have soap? I think I had half a bar of soap from Turkey. And I wash off and I change in some clean clothes and I feel reborn. And they give me dal bhat, which is lentils and rice, which is the staple. And they made it extremely well. It had vegetables. It was delicious. I felt like I had been saved. I felt like my life had been saved by this young couple. This is another reason why I really recommend you use couchsurfing, because you will meet some of the most selfless, gracious, generous, lovely people. They had like kind of a elevated bed thing. It was almost like a fold-out couch, but it wasn't. Set with a blanket. And I don't even remember anything else. I just collapsed. And I slept in quite late, as you can imagine. And that was my first day in Asia. Basically, it was pretty tough. Just growing pains. But I had already seen numerous examples, from the guy, trading, doing currency exchange with me. He didn't have to do that, the guy, because, nobody accepts US dollars. He's going to have to go to a currency exchange and get his, he would get his money, exchange my $10 bill for his money. The office worker who gave me tea, and most importantly, my couch surfing host who picked me up, drove me to a spot. I really, that's why they asked me a favor later on, and I was like, what else can I do for you? You guys are amazing. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that later. I had already figured out where I'd be staying for the first 9 days in Kathmandu. I wanted to give myself some time to get a feel for the city before I went west to Pokhara. And we're going to have some episodes about Pokhara, my friends. Pokhara is technically the second largest city in Nepal. It's about 200 kilometers west, but it doesn't really feel like a city. It feels like a collection of villages to me. Kind of like how Rishikesh is sort of like a collection of these areas. Like Tapovan is very different from the rest of Rishikesh, and there's these different little districts and things, and it's sort of spread out, and it doesn't feel chaotic. It's definitely less busy than Kathmandu. So we'll talk about Pokhara, and a bit of a bumpy introduction to Pokhara as well when I stayed in Leknath, which was interesting. Anyway, these kind of growing pains happen when you get to a new country, especially when at the time I was kind of a newbie to this, This was still October. I had only started my adventure in June. All of this, that's what's crazy to think, like all this stuff. And of course, the pacing will go up and down. It's not going to be this dense. But everything I've told you up to this point, starting with episode 1 of Wanderous, which came out a year ago, a little more than a year ago, was the first, middle of July, middle of August, middle of September. Yeah, this is the first 4 months, almost exactly the first 4 months. I spent 51 episodes covering the first 4 months, so go figure. If you want to support this show and get tons of behind-the-scenes photos and video, you can go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Hello Crusoe. That's HELLOCRUSOE. That is also my username on Instagram and everywhere, I guess. Are there other TikTok. That's my username on TikTok as well. And if you want to just leave a comment, I also love that too. But of course, if you do support the show, it's $10 a month and you get tons. You get commentary, audiobook. You get access to all 3 volumes of 10,000 Hours in Paradise, which is my nonfiction Hawaii adventure. This podcast is kind of a sequel to that in a way, because it's about travel. Just totally changed my life. How much personal growth has come into my life because of travel like this, because I go outside my comfort zone almost compulsively, apparently. And of course, I always love comments. If you have a moment, if you enjoy this episode, or if you have constructive criticism, I would appreciate hearing it. This show does respond and evolve constantly, and part of that is listening to the beautiful souls who listen to it. So thank you for participating, and thank you for sharing some time with me. I hope that you found it interesting, at least. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show on Spotify, or iTunes is still around. Spotify or YouTube. You can subscribe to me on YouTube. My username is my name on YouTube. It's youtube.com/C/Andrew Crusoe, ANDREWCRUSOE. And I'm increasingly putting more and more stuff on there, but every single episode of this show ends up on YouTube. And thumbs up, still helps. It really still helps, and subscriptions really help, so you don't miss any of the adventures coming. I was super lucky in a lot of ways. I had come to this little village in Kathmandu at the perfect time, not just because of the weather, but also there was a festival happening that I didn't even know about. And we'll talk about that next time. We'll talk about the big swing next time. And until then, aloha.